Hi, this is Bill Raymond. A few years back, I created a video showing how to use Microsoft Forms to create tests and quizzes. With shelter-in-place orders, that video has grown in popularity and my inbox has been full of daily questions. In this video, I am recreating the video to answer all the questions educators have been asking me the last 2 months. Let's get started. Before we jump into it and do demos for the rest of this video, I'm just going to show you a few slides. First, I'm going to talk about the agenda. What is Microsoft Forms? How does the licensing work? And then we're going to get into it with demos, how to create quizzes and tests. And then I'm going to talk about some limitations that are in the product that you should be aware of. How do you avoid cheating? And then I'll also walk you through some useful features, tips, and tricks. Microsoft Forms is a web-based technology that allows you to easily create a form. Now, there's two flavors of a form. There's surveys and polls. Now, think of those as the things that you get in your email. You purchase something, and then you get an email later saying, "How was your purchasing experience? Please rate us." You may even see this in your own organization or your school system, where you get an email from, let's just say, HR that says, "What are some expectations for your benefits for next year?" These are forms that you can create, and they're real easy to do. But there's another type of form, which is the same exact technology with some added capabilities in it, and that's called a quiz. And here you can create what I call quizzes or tests. And here you use the same form technology to build out the form, but here you can also add points to say this now is not just a question you're asking someone, but it has points associated with it. And you can even set up which are the right answers, which is what you would expect to see in a test. And then finally, you can even have the system automatically grade the quiz. And afterwards, you can even modify that if you need to. A lot of people have asked me how exactly they can use the Microsoft Forms technology. Now, I am not a licensing expert, so I am not here to say that this information is accurate. What I can tell you is I pulled it from the website link that you see below, and as of 4/29/2020, I believe this to be accurate. So you will need a Office 365 or Microsoft 365 account, and inside that plan, it must support Forms. A student does not need Forms or an Office 365, Microsoft 365 account. But as you will see in this video, it would be useful if they do. Now, you can create up to 200 single forms. So that's 200 quizzes or tests. And you can create up to 100 questions in that single form. And then for the respondents, you can have up to 50,000 responses to that single form. One thing I will bring up later is it does say here up to 100 questions per single form, but there are some question types that take up multiple questions. I'll walk you through that though. This is actually a pretty long video because I had a lot of questions to answer for educators. So down in the description in this YouTube video, you will find links to every one of the areas that I cover in this agenda. So feel free to skip ahead if you'd like. The easiest way to access Microsoft Forms is to just go to forms.microsoft.com. You'll be redirected to a page that looks like this. If you're brought to a marketing site, then that probably means you either don't have a license or you're not signed in. Find the sign in icon and see if you can log in with your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 account, and then you should get in. If you can't, you probably just don't have access. Now, there's another way to access Forms just in case there's some other way that your organization is set up. So you can go to office.com and sign in, and you'll be brought to a list of all of your apps right here at the top. I have the Forms app listed, but you may not see it. If you click on the All Apps icon, then you'll see a list of all the apps you have access to, and you can just locate Forms on this page. And when you click on it, you'll be brought to the same page that I showed you earlier in the demonstration. At this point, if you get a web page that looks like this, where you can create a new form or a new quiz, and you can go ahead and click New Quiz, then you know you're licensed. If you're not licensed, then you'll probably get some sort of a marketing page, and you will have to contact your IT admin Or if you own the Microsoft 365 or Office 365 account, you can always go to portal.microsoft.com and submit a support ticket. Okay, so I clicked on New Quiz just to make sure that you could access it. I'm just going to press the back button here. You can see that this is the list of all the forms that you've created. Remember, there's a form and a quiz. A quiz is the one that we're going to use because this allows us to grade students, where a form is just a way to gather feedback from other individuals. Now, there's a whole bunch of features that are available to you. You can actually share your forms, and you can even work on a form together with other people. So let's say you are an educator and you want to work on a test with one of your fellow educators. You can do that. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on just creating our own quiz. So once again, I'm going to actually delete this. You can see this is the quiz I originally started with. And what I can do is just click on these three dots here and choose delete and continue. And then it's gone. Now, do notice that down here, there's a little trash bin. So even if you delete a quiz, that's still available in the trash bin. I believe it does get cleared out over a period of time. So just be aware of that. All right, so let's get into this for real this time, and we'll click New Quiz. The first thing we're going to do is create a title for the quiz, and then I'm going to walk you through the user interface a little bit. So you can see here it says Untitled Quiz. See how it sort of turns gray as I mouse over it? If I click on that area, you can see it turns into an editing mode. Now, for purposes of this demo, we're going to be an educator who is teaching a course on Cooking 101. Maybe it's a home ec course. I'm just going to say Cooking 101. And for the description, I'll just type in, this test must be taken by you and must be complete between this hour and that hour on this date. So you can describe this at whatever level that you want. Now, notice here, we're going to go into the user interface here for a moment. This is the title. And so if I click outside of that area, then you can sort of see a mini preview. You can't quite fill out the form, but at least you get a sense as to what the form is going to look like. And by the way, I'm going to use the word form, quiz, and test interchangeably, but just be aware that's what I'm talking about when I say form. I am talking about the test or the quiz. Okay, so if I move my mouse over here, you can see it goes back into editing mode. There's an Add New button, which we're going to get into in just a moment. And notice up here where it says Questions, there's also a Responses area. So as your students take the course, you'll actually see in real time how the tests are going. So once someone submits their form, then you'll be able to see the results here. I'll go back to the Questions tab. Now you'll also notice that the title for the form is up here at the top, where it says Cooking 101-saved. That means that really what's happening is Forms is saving this work as you go. So there is no file save option in Forms. It's all web-based, and it just automatically saves for you. Now, over here on the right, you can see that there's a preview option. This allows you to see both the computer version, that's what's being displayed right now, or the mobile version if I click on this top right icon. And now you can see this is what it will look like on the browser for a phone or mobile device. I'll go back to computer. We'll get into doing a response on our own a little bit later. To get back to your form, you just click the back button. You'll also notice that there's a theme option. So maybe you want to select some sort of interesting color or background. You can do that. And also there's an option here to customize the theme. I'm just going to choose this teal background color for purposes of this demo, but you can have some fun with that. Just do be aware, what I find is when you create a test and there's so much going on, sometimes the students can be distracted. So I do like the idea of a solid color more than anything else. Over here, we have the share option. And this is how you're going to share your form. You'll notice you can share a link, send an email. There's different ways that you can go ahead and share the form, and we'll get into that later. Up here, you'll also see this three dots. This says More Form Settings. And when you click on that,
You get the settings option where you can set up some interesting settings for the form. And we'll get into some of the important ones that you'll need to know about, especially as an educator. And then if I click here again, then you can see I can submit feedback. So the Microsoft Forms team might see that. And also there's a terms thing here, which is legal details. And then up here, there's a question mark that gives you online help. At the top left of the form, if you click on the word forms, then it will bring you back to the list of all the forms that you have. So right now we just have this one form called Cooking 101. And so to get back into it, I can click on it. Now I did delete one earlier, but I will point out again, when you hover over any form, there's these 3 dots, and you'll see that you have some different options. So let's say that I created this form, this test, and I really liked it. So I can click copy. It'll create a second copy for me, because maybe I want to create a little bit more of an advanced form, but use some of the same questions I used before. So that's very useful. But I'm just going to go ahead and click those 3 dots and delete this. So we're going to stick with our Cooking 101 form. To go back and edit it, I don't need to click these 3 dots and find an edit option. All I need to do is just click on the form. And we're back again. Now let's start working on our form. The first thing I'm going to do is click on this Cooking 101, and you'll notice that there's a little image here. You can add images to almost any question. And I'm going to go ahead and choose this Insert Image option. You can see it's going to search Bing, and I'm just going to type cooking. Now you'll notice that the search results select images under the Creative Commons licenses. So the chances of this being an image that you actually have to pay for to license is pretty slim. I would be a little bit more cautious if you are sending out this form not just to your students, but to a wider audience for some sort of a paid course, because that doesn't necessarily mean that Creative Commons doesn't always necessarily mean that the image is free. It might even be a mistake. At any point, go ahead and select one. I'm going to select this image here and click the Add button. Good, so now we have an image on the screen, and one of the nice things here is that you'll notice that there's an alternative text for screen readers option. So if you have students that require some accessibility in their ability to read on the browser or see information, you can go ahead and add some alt texts. And you can say this is an image of food in a tray. Okay, and now you've just made your form a little bit more accessible for those that need it. Now let's go ahead and add a question. In order to do that, we just click the Add New button. And we have a number of options. There's choice, text, rating, date, and then there's ranking, Likert, and then there's also the ability to upload a file or use Net Promoter Score and add a section. We're not going to get into everything here, but I am going to use choice because I think that's probably one of the more common question types that you're going to be creating. And so the question that we're going to ask is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? And then the next thing that's going to happen is, you see it says option 1 and option 2. You don't need to use these. As you hover over, you can see there's a trash can to delete that, so you can add your own options. And there's even some suggested options here where you can say, oh, I just want a yes and a no field. And when you click that, it automatically puts them in. But you don't really need to worry about that right now. So in our case, we're going to say it is a fruit. It is a vegetable. And then I'm going to choose add an option because I can have multiple choices in this question. And it doesn't just have to be 2. So here I'm going to say it is a fruit that is nutritionally considered a vegetable. And then I click outside the form, and you can see how that looks. You get these 3 radio buttons here. I'll click back on the form. Now, because this is a test, and because this is an important question, we probably want to make this required. So you'll see down on the bottom right-hand corner, we can make that required. We can also decide if this is going to be a multiple choice or not question. And I am going to point out, let's take a look at this multiple choice option. If I click this, watch the circles over here on the next to the questions. I'll choose multiple choice, and it goes to a checkbox. So I'm just going to do that a few times. You can see it goes from circle to checkbox. And it's even more prevalent when I go into the preview option. Here you can see the checkboxes are really clear. If I click back and turn off multiple choice and go back to preview, you can see there's that radio button where I can only choose one answer. Now there's a points option here, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And I also will point out now that for each one of these questions that you create, there's usually going to be a more settings for this section. Look for those 3 dots. Sometimes they're just hanging out there, and when you click on them, they actually have some really good options. For example, I might want to make this a drop-down question. And when I do that, it looks a little bit much the same on the form. But now if I come back here to preview, you can see I now have to choose the question from the drop-down. And what's nice about this is it saves some screen real estate. If your test is just a few questions, then maybe using the radio buttons or the checkboxes are fine. But if your test has a lot of questions, then using this little drop-down option is a good idea. Okay, so we're just going to leave that like that. And once again, I can click inside to do the editing mode, or click outside to kind of see what the form looks like without all of the editing elements in place. Let's add another question. I'll click Add New and choose Text this time. We want the student to answer the question with text. They're going to have to type something. And you can say, with just one word, describe what this kitchen item is called. And then you can go ahead and add a picture like we did before. Notice you can choose image or video. I'm going to go ahead and search for toaster and add that. And then in our answer, the student's going to have to type in the text, but we can put the correct answer down here. And we can just go ahead and type toaster. And that won't matter whether it's capitalized or not. The student just needs to type the word toaster. Now, I press the tab key on my keyboard, so that's there now. And we might also just recognize the fact that even though we said with just one word, the student might type bread toaster, a toaster, a bread toaster. Okay, so you can add a few alternative answers there, and each one of those are correct. The student's not going to see these, only you will see these. So these are just your answers. The student's going to have to type up here. You unfortunately cannot limit the number of words that the student types, so you must describe that in the question. You'll notice here it is required because the previous question was required. Forms automatically makes the next question required as well. If, for example, you wanted the student to write a paragraph that describes what a toaster does, then you could maybe choose long answer, and you can see that the enter your answer becomes a longer larger area to type their answer. But notice when you choose long answer, there's no longer a way to add your correct answers. So just be aware of that. Also down here on the bottom right, you'll see that there's some additions that you can put in here. One of the cool things that I think a lot of educators will like is that you can add mathematical equations. We're not doing that in this particular example, but just be aware that mathematical equations are fully supported in Microsoft Forms. Now we'll have the student enter a number. So we'll choose Add New, and oddly, we're going to choose Text. And in this one, we're going to say, how many fluid ounces are there in a tablespoon of water? And right now, of course, the student can answer this with text, but we want it to be a number. So remember down here on the bottom right, I said you'll find some useful information or some useful features of each question. I'll click the three dots and I'll choose restrictions. And now in the restrictions, I could choose number. Now that's cool. The other thing that I can do, of course, is I can also choose greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So imagine I was asking the student for a typical bread, what's the temperature for a typical bread? And you could say between 160 and 170, 180, 190, 200, 210. And what you could do is have the student answer in various ways using numbers. But here we're just going to use number. And of course, I can add an answer. And I'll just say 0.5. And now what I'm going to do is just preview that answer, preview that form. So if I choose preview and I come down here, I can type 0.5. And notice as I'm typing, I initially put a point there that's actually not a real number, the point. It's considered text until I put a number. So I can type hello, and it's going to say must be a number. I can type point, still says must be a number, but then 5, now it will work. Okay, so just to be aware, that's how that user interface element works. I'm going to add one more new question, and this is where I want to point out something kind of important. If I come down here to this little add new option and then choose this little drop down, I can choose some other different types of questions. Now, here is this one that I really like called a Likert. And if I select this, you could have a question like, how hot are these peppers? You could say, not that hot, not that hot, medium spicy, really hot. And then I could just also come in here and kind of delete some of these columns. And then I can say red bell pepper. And then I could say jalapeno. And then I could say, ghost pepper. And now the student can go ahead. If I go ahead and preview this, you'll see the student can answer these questions however they feel. And this is a really nice type of question. I'm going to click the back button here. And I'm going to come down and point out that there is no option to add an answer. As a matter of fact, if I add points here, it won't count because this feature, for some reason, is only available for forms. So even though it's perfectly fine for you to use this Likert, it's really nice feature, but you aren't going to get the capability of actually grading this with an automatic grading system. You're going to have to grade this yourself. And if you'll remember at the top of this lesson, I did mention that there's a few different types of questions that might cost extra, meaning that there's one question that can take up multiple questions in your licensing. This is one of those. So I have 3 different items here. That means that's 3 different questions. So this actually takes up 3 questions of your 100 total questions that you can have in a form. So I want to delete this because I'm not going to use this. I want automatic management of my questions. And when Microsoft comes out with the scoring feature for Likerts, then we can go ahead and revisit that. By the way, that could happen anytime. I could release this video and suddenly it's available. So go ahead and check it out yourself and see, because things do change. Microsoft does update their products. I'll choose delete question, and I'm going to choose add new to just create one more question. We'll be creating some others, but that's when we get into how we avoid cheating and some other things. So I'm going to enter a choice. And I'm going to say, what are the two most common temperatures you will see in cookbooks? And I apologize for all my really poor writing skills while I do this. But okay, so I'll just go ahead and type Fahrenheit, Celsius, oops, jeez. And I'll add one more. Hopefully I spelled that right. And Kelvin. Okay, so at this point, we basically have our test set up. We have 4 questions that we're going to ask, and the student's going to have to respond to these 4 questions. They're all required. So now let's get into how we set up scoring for the test. So we'll start back up here at the top with this, is a tomato a fruit or vegetable question. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the number of points for each one of our questions. So the tomato question is going to be 20 points. And I can just put that in the points area here. Now, here's what's important to know, is that you can type whatever number of points you want. It doesn't need to add up to 100 or 100%. It's just a number. So you pick the number. It could add up to 10. It could add up to 1,000. Really, it's up to you. So we can just scroll down here and go into each one of our questions and set some points. I'll make the toaster one 5. I'll make the fluid ounces one 30. And I'll make this Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin one 15. There. And I'm pressing tab each time I'm done. This way I know it sticks. Of course, I could just click outside of the form and I know that it's there. As a matter of fact, I'm clicking outside the form now, and I can kind of see what my questions look like. And look at this. You'll see 15 points, 30 points, 5 points, and 20 points. So right off the bat, the student's going to see that. So if we go into the preview mode, you can see this is what the student will see, is each one of those points. As a teacher, as the educator, I'm going to go back, you can see right here it says that the total number of points that you could possibly make for this, by taking this test, is 70 points. So it's automatically added up here on the form for you. Now let's go ahead and add all of the answers to our questions. So I'm going to click on the first one, is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? Now, technically it is a fruit, but also it is a fruit that is nutritionally considered a vegetable. I guess that's also depending on where you live in the world. But what I want to do is say that this is the correct answer. And so over here on the right-hand side, you can see I can put a correct answer here. And that is going to automatically calculate whether the student passed that question or not. In other words, when the student goes and they choose vegetable, they're not going to get the 20 points because they did not select the right answer. Let's come back down to this next one here. We already added the answers here. Remember, we typed toaster, bread toaster, a toaster, things like that. Okay, and then we come down to our fluid ounces, and we already have the answer for that. That's that 0.5. You can see it's almost natural to be putting some of these answers in here. And then finally, what we're going to do is update this one, which is the 2 most common temperatures you'd see in cookbooks. Well, this can't be just one choice. So we'll choose that to multiple choice. We've already done that before. And we'll come over here and we'll choose Fahrenheit and Celsius, because Kelvin is not seen in most cookbooks, at least not yet. Who knows what the future holds? So let's go ahead and take the test. We'll click the preview button at the top of the page. And now we'll go ahead and answer some questions correctly or incorrectly. For is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? I'm going to choose the incorrect answer, which is a vegetable. Notice the student, as a student, I do not see the answers. I just see the question. And I'm going to type toaster, which is the correct answer. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type 0.7 fluid ounces instead of 0.5. And I'll choose Fahrenheit and Celsius. I'm not going to choose Kelvin, so that's a correct answer. And I'm going to go ahead and submit the form. Once a student takes a test, they can view their results. Now, as a teacher, you might be saying, oh, wait a minute. I don't want my student to see the results because there could be cheating involved. They might pass the results around. We can fix that. But right now, let's just take a look at what the user interface looks like if you do allow the student to view the results. So I'll click the View Results button, and you can see right off the bat, the student gets this thing that says, you've got 20 out of 70 points. And it will also show you not only the fact that you answered the question incorrectly, but it's also going to show you the correct answer. Okay, so toaster was right, so I got a checkbox. Correct answer was 0.5 for that fluid ounces question, and I got this correct. So I can see how many points I made right off the bat. So again, you do not have to turn that feature on. Now let's take a look at these two tabs. We have the Questions tab and the Responses tab. To date, the Responses tab has just been sitting there, but notice there's this little 1 next to it. That's because a student, it was actually me, submitted the form, and now we see the response. So anytime the student submits a form, you'll see all of the responses on this dashboard page. You can see the responses is total of 1, an average score of 20. And then what we can do is review the answers for each one of the students and post the scores. We're not going to get into great detail here yet on that. So let's go to review answers though. And you can see it says William Raymond. It knows that that's William Raymond because I'm logged in as William Raymond on Microsoft Office 365 and Microsoft 365. And there's a whole user interface for scoring. But let's not get into that quite yet because I want to start now talking about how we get the students to fill out the form. Microsoft Forms works best when the students are all on the same Office 365 or Microsoft 365 tenant. What does tenant mean? Well, essentially, if you're all using the same domain name. So let's say that I'm Bill at myschool.org. If all my students log into Office 365 as Steve at myschool.org, Sharon at myschool.org, then that's going to be great because they all probably have access to forms if you do. And when they fill it out, their name will automatically be filled out in the responses. Otherwise, you're not going to know who responded. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say that you have students that don't have an Office 365 or Microsoft 365 account. We're going to come over here to the Share menu item. And you can see here it says only share with people in my organization. That's the same people that have that myschool.org email address, for example. So if my students aren't in that organization, they don't have that email address, can't access forms, then you need to send it to them with this anyone with the link can respond. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that link that was automatically generated. And we'll just say that I emailed that link out to my students. So now I'm a student and I want to take the test. So what you can do in order to pretend as if you're the student is go to the File menu and choose New Incognito Window or Private Browsing, whatever feature your browser has, and paste that link in that was shared. So this is what the student's view looks like. Notice that it says required here, which is nice. If the student were logged in, it would actually show their name up here as well. But now the student can go ahead and answer the questions. And what we're going to do is answer this quiz. And we're going to just go ahead and do this as if we were a student and we're not logged into Office 365, Microsoft 365. Note that it didn't have us log in, and we are not logged in on the top right or anything like that because we are in an incognito view right now. So I'll go ahead and submit that form. And the cool thing is the student's going to see this view results option. And again, we can turn this off, but they can automatically see their grade. However, if we turn this off, that causes us another problem. So I'm going to go ahead and exit the incognito window. And now I'm back in Microsoft Forms. You can see I'm logged in. There's my Bill Raymond login. And we're actually editing the form as a teacher again. And you can see here's that responses. There's 2 responses now. This time, let's go ahead and review answers. And here's the first response that I did. And now let's go to the next one. I'll click this little right arrow. And you can see it just says respondent 2. Well, that's not too helpful. Who's respondent 2? I don't know what student that is. So what you're going to end up with is a situation that you just don't know who the student is. So let's go ahead and force the student to enter their name and their email address that I can use to send them their scores. So I'll go ahead and click the back button here and go into my questions. And I'm going to come down and add a new question. And in this question, it's going to be text. And it's going to say, please type your full name. And this won't have any points. I'll just clear that out and press tab. And it's just going to be a text question. Again, no answers associated with this. I'll click add new again. Again, another text field. And type, please type your email address. If I can type here, your email address. Okay, good. And again, we'll make that required, but it gets no points. Now, as we look at these responses and we review the answers, I want to see the name of the person up at the top. So I don't want to have to scroll to the bottom to see that that was Sally that responded. I want to see it right here up at the top. So I'll click the back button, go back to my questions, and I'm going to bring the full name and email address up to the top. So how do I do that? I click on full name, and you'll see that there's an up arrow and a down arrow. So I'll just go ahead and click up arrow, and it's going to keep moving that up to the top. There we go. And I'll come back down here to the email address, and I'm going to do the same thing. Oop, I moved it a little too far, so I can move it down. There. So now the form has enter your full name and email address. This way, we always will get the student's response before they take the test. I'm going to go into an incognito window one more time, and I'm going to respond to that form again. And this time, I'm going to just verify that the full name and email address options work. So I'll just type Bill Raymond, and then bill.raymond@cambermass.com. And then I can go ahead and say, answer my questions as I normally would. And I'll close this. Now, the reason for why I just did this was because what I want to show you next is in this Responses tab, we can go to Review Answers. And as we come over here to respondent number 3, you can see now there's the information that you need right at the top of the form. As a matter of fact, if I come over here to William Raymond, it's not going to show that because that's me logged in. So I just want to point that out. You really want to get that into your form immediately if your students aren't going to use forms on their Office 365 or Microsoft 365 license. So let's go back and then open this Excel option. So if I click Open in Excel, you'll see I have the option of opening this up. And I'll just drag it onto my screen. And you can see all of the questions that are asked and the answer. So here you can see the reason for why the email is filled in on this one in the name is because that was the first one where I was logged in. These other two are anonymous, okay? And so all the questions and answers that we ask are right here inside of the form, along with that student's answers. So you always have a Microsoft Excel file that you can draw back to if you need to get some data and then submit that to the student manually. So speaking of manually sending information to a student, you do have this post scores option. And you see here we have respondent 2 and respondent 3. Those are the anonymous users. Even if we might have collected their email address, there's no way for us to click post scores and then share that result with the user, with the respondent, with the person that took the test. There's a preview option, so you can actually click on preview and see the response. But if I copy this URL and send it to someone that's not logged in, doesn't have access to Microsoft 365 or Office 365 and Forms, then they're not going to be able to do it. They're going to be prompted to purchase a Microsoft Forms or Office 365 license. So what you're going to have to do is one of two things. You are going to have to use that Excel spreadsheet and then send the details to the student, or you can go to this review answers option and go through and review the answers. And then what you can do is press these 3 dots here and print the response and save that to PDF. And once you save that to PDF, you can go ahead and email that to your student. So it's a little extra work, I know, but that's the way that you can do that. At this point, I've taught you how to create a quiz, how to add answers to your quiz, how to make sure you collect the user's or the respondent's full name and email address. And I've even shown you how to manage responses and get the results back to the student. Among other things, those are what we covered. Now, what I want to talk about now is the unfortunate part of quiz taking, which is cheating. And this is where people are going to try and figure out ways to cheat. And there's no perfect method here, but I do have some ideas that will help reduce it greatly, I think. The first anti-cheating tip that I'm going to provide is shuffling the options. So if I click here on is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable, the student is always going to see a pick list that looks like this. It is a fruit, it is a vegetable, it is a fruit that is nutritionally considered a vegetable. So imagine a time when a student is taking the test and asks another student, hey, which one did you pick? And they say, oh, I picked the second one. Then the chances are that you'll see a whole bunch of students choosing the second one because someone else answered it that way. So what we can do is actually shuffle the questions. So, shuffle the answers. So we'll click on this settings and choose shuffle options. And now you see it says fruit, vegetable, nutritionally. I'll click preview and take a look at what it looks like now. Now it says nutritionally fruit, vegetable. And go back and preview again. Nutritionally fruit, vegetable. So this time it showed up the same time. But what will happen is Forms is going to randomize these. These are only 3 answers. So there's not so much randomization that can occur. So some people might always see a fruit as a second option, but other people won't see fruit as a second option. So that's option number 1. And so we can do that to any of our multiple choice questions. I can do that to this Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin one. Again, I click inside of it, I click the options, and I choose shuffle options. And again, it may show in this order, but it may not, and it will just shuffle those for each one of the individuals. This anti-cheating tip takes shuffling the options for an answer and goes one step further and actually shuffles all of the questions. So let's go ahead and click the 3 dots at the top of our form and choose settings. And now we can come over here and choose shuffle questions. And so when I do that, it will essentially shuffle every single question. But remember, we have the first two, fill in your name and fill in your email address, that we always want to show at the top of the form. So what we can do is say lock questions 1 through 2. There we go. And so now when I go and, well, before I preview the form, let's take a look at this. We have full name, email address, and is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? Let's preview. Here we have full name, email address. That's great. We locked those in place so that those always show up. But now instead of fruit or vegetable, now we have how many fluid ounces are there in a tablespoon of water. So again, the reason for why this is helping with the cheating situation is people will say, well, what option did you choose for number 3? Well, my number 3 and your number 3 might be different. And if you have multiple choice questions, someone might say, hey, which of the options did you select for question number 5? And they'll say number 2. Oh, but wait a minute. Question number 5 isn't even their number 5. So number 2 is always going to be the wrong answer, kind of a thing. So you get the idea. We're shuffling both the answers to the questions and we're shuffling the questions themselves. And we're also locking in place the fields that we do not want to be shuffled into the mix. Another way to avoid cheating is to force students to take the test at a specific date and time. Remember, at the top of the video, I actually typed, this test must be taken by you and must be complete between this hour and that hour on this date. You can actually set that up in Microsoft Forms. So go to the 3 dots and choose Settings again. And this time we can choose a start date and an end date. And we can even put a time. So we can say, for example, that the test starts at 3 p.m. and ends at 4 p.m. on a certain date. Now, here's the one thing that I will warn you about. This is kind of going to lock the form in. So let's say that the student at 4:01 goes to submit the form. It might prevent the student from ever getting that in. So what you might want to do is not share the link to the form until it's time to take the test, but maybe set it to start at 2:30 and end at 4:30. So that's something to consider, just to make sure that, you're putting in these restrictions in order to prevent cheating, but then maybe that restriction also prevents a student who's just trying to get in their last answer to get that in on time. Of course, you can always come back and turn the form back on again afterwards. You don't have to. You could just turn this off if you want and turn it back on. So let's say a student at some point wants to do a makeover on the test. You could set up another date and time for that. But again, that at least puts you in control and helps prevent some cheating by the students kind of going in and taking the test whenever they want and then getting back to you after they've all compared their answers. If you know all of your students are going to log in to their Microsoft Office 365, Microsoft 365 account and use Forms, then you'll know who that student is. You can come up here to the 3 dots, go to Settings, and then choose Only People in my organization can respond. You can say record the name and 1 response per person. That kind of stops the student from answering the questions for another student. Now the student's going to have to actually know the email address and password for that other student. So that helps to reduce cheating right there. However, if you choose anyone with the link can respond, then Microsoft Forms has no idea if that's the same person responding 20 times or not. So in other words, let's say that I'm going to cheat on the test on behalf of a few students. So I come in here, I type my name and my email address, and I answer the questions. And then I go in and just go ahead and type Sharon and Sharon's email address and answer her questions. To you, you'll have no idea that that's the student that is answering the questions. Now, by putting this start and end date with a time on it, that's super helpful because Now that student that's doing the cheating on behalf of someone else has to do that in the period of time that the other students have, and all those items are being shuffled around. So it's not like they can just quickly write down all the questions and get the answers down. They're going to have to do a little bit of work. Now, what you normally do is just go over here to the share menu and say, anyone with this link can respond, and copy this link. Now, you might be tempted to send an email to all of your students at once saying, hey, students, it's time to take the test. Here's the link. Click on this. But here's a little trick that I came up with that you can use as an educator. And again, is just one in your arsenal of anti-cheating tools. So here you can see I created a spreadsheet with all of my students and their email addresses. And now here's my Cooking 101 class. And what I'm going to do is put a code in. And I'm going to say it's 3421 for Bill. It's 9873 for Sharon. It's 0101 for Steve. And 6573 for Karen. I could even randomly generate that. Maybe putting a 0 in front of Steve's wasn't the best idea. There we go. So now each student has a 4-digit code that they're going to have to enter. So then what I can do is go into Microsoft Forms. I can add a new question. I'll make it text. And I will say, enter your code. And then I'll just go ahead and put a restriction, make that a number, and no answer, and bring that to the top of the list here. And of course, go into settings and say lock questions 1 through 3 now. Okay, so what I all just did was I asked the student to type their name, email address, and a code. So now the person that might be helping to cheat also needs this code. And of course, it could be anything else. Now, I tried to keep this from being creepy, like saying, tell me your eye color or something like that. But you get the idea. You could go ahead and ask the student something that kind of identifies them. And, no cheating. Cheating is always going to occur. And I think the idea of just piling them up, randomizing the questions, randomizing the options for each one of the questions, having them enter this code, all these things kind of add up and help kind of prevent something from happening, adding the date and time in which the test can be taken. So I hope that helps you with some of the anti-cheating ideas that I came up with. And of course, I'd love to hear your ideas. So if you have another idea, put them in the comments so other educators can see them, or feel free to email me, and maybe I'll update this video in the future with some of those recommendations. I promise to share with you a few tips, tricks, and share a few limitations as well, so I'm going to walk you through these in no particular order. Now, one of the cool things that we used, one of the nice features, is when we clicked on these 3 dots here and chose settings at the top of the form, we chose the shuffle questions option, which helps to prevent cheating. Now, there's a neat feature that comes with forms. I'm going to scroll down here and choose Add New and show that to you. You can create sections. And so if I choose section here, you could say, here's the extra credit questions. And then you could put them all in that section. Now, unfortunately, what that does is it actually comes, if I come over here to settings for the form, it actually turns off the shuffle questions option. So I think the forms people decided, well, you can only shuffle questions all throughout the form, and they didn't take sections into consideration. So unfortunately, if you want to use sections, which are useful, you also will lose the shuffle questions option. But again, this section feature is kind of nice. I used extra credit. I could also click these 3 dots, choose Move, bring it up to the top. And this is where I could have said, enter your name and your email address and what have you. It's a nice way to break things up. If you put a section in here and you realize I don't want this in my form, what you can do is just go ahead and click the 3 dots, choose Remove Section, and then just choose Just Section. It does create a question initially, so the section's still there. So you are going to have to go remove section one more time, and now you're back in business and the section's gone. Now, working on these forms by yourself is one thing, but you might also be co-teaching and you want to work with one of the other educators on your team. And so you can go to the Share menu and choose Share to Collaborate and get a link to view and edit. Now, keep in mind, there is this pick list here. So you're probably already expected me to say this, but you are going to need the Office 365 account. And you're going to need to be on the same organization. So go ahead and copy that link and use that. It may be that you actually don't have to be in the same organization for this, but again, they're definitely going to need access to forms. You can copy this link and then share it with that other educator, and you can both work on editing this form together. There's another cool feature, which is to share this as a template. So notice that it says anyone with the link can duplicate. So this is really nice. So imagine that you created this test, and there's other home economics teachers that you know that want to use Microsoft Forms, and they say, hey, do you have something that I can start with? Yeah, sure I do. You can just go share as a template, copy this link, and send it off to the other teachers. Now, they can bring that in and then start working on their own copy. Now, just in case that link gets out, you don't want students getting a link to that, you can just go ahead and delete that link and remove it. Okay, you can also do that with the collaboration link to remove it. And now you're preventing people from either getting a new copy or collaborating with you. Thank you for sticking it out with me for such a long video. I appreciate it. Just do keep in mind, there's a lot more that I have not gone into with forms. I just wanted to give you enough to get started. So you'll probably have lots of questions. Feel free to make comments in this video on YouTube, and you can always email me if you have any other questions. I might even follow up with another video, just like I did for this one. So in the meantime, happy teaching and happy quizzing. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more like this, please like, comment, and click the bell to support my channel.